I'd like to call the EDCE meeting to order for January 16th. Happy New Year to everybody. And first item of business would be the roll call.
Albany? Here. Berkeley is expected. Dublin?
Here.
Emeryville?
Here.
Fremont is also expected late. Hayward?
Here.
Livermore?
Here.
Oakland? Excused. Piedmont? Excused. San Leandro?
Present.
Union City? Here. Community Advisory Committee is expected late.
Okay.
You have a quorum.
We do have a quorum.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, please join Director Hernandez in the pledge. You. There's two, but this one.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Awesome. All right. I'll let you read the title on the closed session.
Okay, with your permission, Mr. Chair, we'll adjourn into closed session, which is a conference with legal counsel, initiation of litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subdivision D, California Government Code section 54956.9. The one case we'll be discussing and we'll report out after the closed session.
Okay, so we're going to closed session. And hopefully there's nobody in there.
does for public comment.
Okay, we're reconvening out of closed session. Council, do you have anything to report?
We met in closed session to discuss initiation of litigation or significant exposure to litigation. Direction was given to council, and at a later meeting when the matter is been filed, we will report out again at the next meeting.
Okay. With that, during the closed session, it should be noted that Director Kalb, Director May, and Director Aragon did attend that closed session after the original roll call, so they were in closed session. Okay, doke.
Pardon me,
Right.
Chair. Director Rude was also present.
Didn't I say rude? No. I'm sorry. You get so mad at me when I mess up, too. I apologize. Okay, that's what I get for being, and note that Anna Olivia is here, too. So we are almost at full capacity, I think. Thank you all for being here. Okay, so with that, that was done. General Counsel report out of closed session. Public comment, time in which you can speak to anything that is not on today's agenda. I have Dwight Turner, and after him would be Mr. Al Weinreb. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, Council. My name is Dwight Turner. I'm resident of Hayward, address 28700 Barn Rock Drive. I live in a single-family residence, and I have solar and, trying to do all the things to conserve energy. My concern to the Commission and to the Board is I'm trying to understand the long-range goals of this group, and if their plans are just to take out PG&E and replace it with energy from acquired by this group, or is it more long-range plans of going to microgrid or helping people to become more solar independent, and will there be incentives for using local, state, and U.S. Manufactured additional incentives to use products that are manufactured within that area instead of just Chinese, or not anything necessarily against Chinese or German or whatever, but just more incentives to churn over and grow our own green energy. And so I'm looking to hear more of that. I looked through the website, which I had some difficulty, but I made some comments to in the advisory committee about that. And so I'm just looking for more information, and I've been talking with Dan Lieberman about some of my concerns and issues.
Well, Mr. Turner, thank you for coming. The unfortunate thing about public comment is we can listen to you, but we can't really talk back to you. But Nick, can you please do me a favor, quit smiling over there? And would you do me a favor, and it's okay if you smile, it's fine. Do me a favor and assign a staff person to maybe take Mr. Turner to the side and talk to him briefly and see if we can help him with some of his questions. They're assigning a staff person to you right now, so if you turn around, somebody's going to raise their hand. There you go. They're going to talk to you, okay, Mr. Turner?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Weinreb?
Hello, everybody. I'm Al Weinreb, the coordinator of the Local Clean Energy Alliance, and I can't remember, there's some new people here, so I don't know if you know me, but I have spoken in the past, in the last meeting and this meeting around the PCIA charges, and it's not directly in the regulatory report, so I just wanted to say a word about this right now. We sent out a letter to the board today just a short letter, two-sided letter, about the really significant importance of taking on this issue and making sure that that decision of the CPUC gets rolled back, and to talk about a number of initiatives that are in process of being developed, and about the strong importance of the board taking this up very aggressively, both within your cities as members of the public, but also as a board of East Bay Community Energy, to really mobilize the resources to be able to save our community choice program and to save community choice across the state, which is very seriously under attack. I know there's been a lot of stuff about the PG&E bankruptcy protection filing and all this other stuff, which tended to draw attention off, but this is still, the heart of our community choice, is to be able to continue to survive under very, very strong attack. So I hope you folks can take a look at the letter and the backgrounder that accompanied it, which tries to make the case more strongly than I can do in a minute or two right here, and that I hope that we can set up meetings to talk in more depth and answer your questions, about the different issues that are involved. So that's more or less. I think we did come to we did come to the Community Advisory Committee and talked about it quite a bit, and I think Ann Olivia will have something to report about that. But I just wanted to make sure that you all knew about the letter, so you can look for it. And we'd be happy to try to answer questions. It sounds like it's a sort of a hairy problem, but it's really sort of simple when it gets really down to the base. So thank you very much, and hope to be talking to you more about it soon.
Thank you, Al. With that, I have no other speakers for public comment, so we will move on. I'm looking for approval of the consent calendar, which is items 6 through 9, as you can see in front of you. I still don't know what that noise is. Somebody want to move the consent? Moved by Carol Ducci, seconded by Director Pilch. Is there any objection to the motion? Director Carol Ducci, Director Pilch. Okay. Is there any objection to the motion before you? Seeing none, the motion passes without objection. CEO report.
First, can we put up the marketing and outreach update slides? Annie, please. So this is an update on the current status of marketing and outreach activities, including current opt-outs and opt-ups.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So we'll start tonight with enrollment and some information about account services. So apologies for the small numbers here, but hopefully you all have a copy in front of you. So we've done what we've done previously, which is to break down the opt-out numbers as well as the participation in the different products offered by EBCE by jurisdiction. The total bottom line is that we are still just over 2% of opt-out, which is fantastic. I think we had much more conservative, higher opt-out numbers in our forecast for both energy and for our finances, so this is looking very good. We do anticipate that this number will continue to go up. So I ran this, it's probably now like 10 days ago January 3rd, there we go, a little bit more than that. So, numbers continue to go up. We do have customers seeing EBCE charges on their bill for the first time. So that's to be expected, but then we'll start to see a leveling out of these numbers. I did want to add some notes to the bottom here because I've had a couple people reach out to me who have seen these public documents and wondered, why do we have such high participation in different programs in different jurisdictions? So just for the public record, I wanted to put on here sort of some of the conditions about the default products as well as the municipal opt-ups that we've had in our program. If we could go to the next slide, please. Or do I have it here? Okay, thank you. So here is our residential opt-outs by month. We did have a large spike in October. Again, this is in line with other CCAs and what they've experienced in their mass enrollment periods. So that was our second notice, and just before we started enrollment, I do think that probably the public impression was that if they didn't opt out before November 1, that they couldn't do so. So that explains the spike. Came down a bit in November, and then you can see December and a little bit of January. The colors indicate the channel by which a customer opted out. The primary purple there is web, the light blue is our automated phone system, and then the darker blue is direct with a call or a customer service representative in our call center. And I believe the next slide should be our commercial opt-outs. May, just before our June enrollment, continues to be a high point, and then August as commercial customers got their bills. But you can see it's been fairly low. I mean, the top line there in October is about 160. So we don't see a lot of these opt-outs coming through. I will say we have a special flag in our system for our largest customers, so those that are on E19 and E20 rate schedules, which are our very large customers, that flags for us when any of these opt out. And Dan Lieberman, who just stepped out to help another customer, actively looks into that. We often pull the call recording to identify what the issue was, and we are able to, in some cases, give a call out to that customer, try and provide additional education about the benefits of being on EBCE service. So we continue to monitor that and manage it actively. So for the account services side of our business, we did complete our first month of residential billing. So far, so good. Hopefully some of you have seen those charges on your bill. Some of you who do have solar on your homes have not seen those yet because you're not yet enrolled. Don't worry, it's coming. I'm sorry? Ironically, yes. You're the last ones in. We are preparing on the account services side for when there is a decision about the PG&E 2019 rates. So typically those rates go into effect on January 1. This year, much like last year, that has been delayed. We anticipate it will be March 1. I can't imagine that even in light of the bankruptcy that will go later. I mean, it's important that we PG&E and us, set our rates based on expenses. But based on that, we just want to be prepared from a call center perspective, a bill explanation perspective, that we're ready to support our customers. We are also preparing for our solar customer engagement, so we often refer to that as NEM, or Net Energy Metered Customers. We will do our first phase of enrollment. The enrollment will happen in April, which actually means the first notification goes out next month. And that will be for those customers that have a PG&E anniversary or true-up date, January, February, March, or April. Those will all get enrolled in April, and then it'll be every other month going forward. And then we also continue to notice our new customers. This is a compliance item that we're required to do. So essentially, if someone moves into a unit from outside the county, they get a new service agreement identification number, and we're required to give them 2 post-enrollment notifications letting them know about EBCE and that we're now providing their service. So we basically do 2-week batches of new customers, and then they get a notice. They get 2 notices over the course of 2 months. I think the next slide. So now for the marketing and outreach update, I really feel like we're in this new phase. So we were heads down, a little bit building the plane while we were flying it for our marketing and outreach during mass enrollment, and we now have a little bit more time to step back and look forward into the next 6 months, the next year, about what we're doing for marketing and outreach. Most of our paid advertising campaigns have ended. I still get excited. I'm still seeing it on the sides of buses, at least in downtown Oakland. So coming out of that AC Transit garage, we still have them on the sides of buses. But most of those paid advertisements have ended. And it was really a big push to raise awareness about EBCE during our mass enrollment. So we are developing our strategy for ongoing marketing, but you'll see in the budget item later on, we're trying to be very targeted and efficient with how we're spending those marketing dollars, given all the uncertainties around rates and PCIA and everything else that's going on in the utility world. We are developing some form of communication plan. I do feel like this has taken a little bit of a backseat given the current news around PG&E, but we do need to have a communication plan ready for when rates do change. There's still uncertainty about exactly how those rates are going to change, but we want to be prepared and make certain that we are communicating to our customers, continuing to build trust with those customers, and making sure that our call center is prepared. And then we are looking to identify outreach events, as I said, for the next 6 months, 12 months. I've already mentioned to many of your staff during the technical advisory group that meets at Stop Waste, that was just yesterday, requesting some feedback on Earth Day events or other key outreach events that they feel we should be part of, either as a sponsor or a participant. So I also welcome your feedback on any of that if you would like to have EBCE representation at your events. We do have some other, we've moved away from sort of the big festivals, mainly because it's that time of year. There aren't as many sort of big events happening, but we are doing very focused workshops. So our wonderful outreach fellows have been working on in-language workshops, so we'll be doing a Spanish language workshop in partnership with the Unity Council in the Fruitvale district of Oakland. That'll be later this month, and then we're doing a Chinese in-language, probably some tabling followed by a workshop, and that'll be later in February. And then Danny Kelly is doing an Understanding Your Bill tour. So I've shared that flyer with you. We tried to get good geographic distribution. We just added another one in Livermore. We did try to do some after hours, and we've gotten some feedback that they should be more focused on after hours. I will say it's hard to get a commitment from like a public space to be there in sort of their peak hours. But if you have any additional recommendations, we are open to that. We'd love to continue this tour. I think we've gotten some really good feedback over social media from the postings, and the county has leveraged their recently activated Nextdoor public agency account to help push this information out throughout the county. So I think as of the last time I looked, there were 55 thanks to that post that just went out this morning. So I thought that was a great way to collaborate and use the Nextdoor platform. And I think that is it for the marketing and outreach. Are there any questions? Sorry, I took your question.
It's okay, I'll let you get away with it this time. Questions? Al?
So given that our opt-in rate is 98%, and all the stuff going on around the PG&E bankruptcy, potential bankruptcy, has there been any discussion about reviewing our marketing plan to maybe we scale back since we have 98% of the customers, maybe we scale up because of what's going on in PG&E? Have we talked about that internally at the staff level, I mean?
So in light of the bankruptcy, we have provided talking points to our call center to make certain that we are providing clear guidance on how to speak about the bankruptcy. I think that's it can be a very sensitive area because it is a legal issue, so we clearly don't want folks to just opine on these things. We want them to sort of follow some key messaging points. But in terms of like a broader paid advertising or broader marketing, we haven't specifically discussed how that changes in light of bankruptcy. I will say I've been looking at this next period of time for marketing to be more about building on the customer relationship and brand awareness, and not necessarily, targeted campaigns for opting up or taking other explicit activity. That's certainly something that we can explore further, but it was really about sort of engaging with our communities and being out and part of and visible to our communities and customers.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So the next item is related to the local development business plan, and the big news here is we have hired a leader for those efforts. So I'd like to ask JP to stand up. You will read his bio and give you a second to maybe give a little bit more background. John Peter Ross, JP, is joining East Bay Community Energy as our Senior Director of Local Development, Electrification, and Energy Innovation. JP joins EBC after spending the last 3 years as the Group Manager for Solar at Origin Energy, one of Australia's largest retail electricity providers. Prior to working at Origin, JP was the Vice President of Strategic Relationships at Sungevity. Some of you may have Sungevity solar systems on your homes. And prior to that, JP served as a Deputy Director at Vote Solar and as an energy campaigner with Greenpeace. JP has a BA and BS from Santa Cruz and an MS in Energy and Resources from UC Berkeley. JP lives in Berkeley, California.
JP? Well, look, they're clapping. Okay. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Nick, for the introduction, and I just wanted to come up and say I'm really excited to be working with EBCE. The first week has been quite interesting, to say the least. So as usual, in a startup organization and company, things are pretty fast and furious, and we've got to wear a lot of hats. But I'm really excited to build on the good work that was put into the local development business plan and start delivering some value and benefits to our ratepayers and customers and stakeholders, and really have already started getting some good feedback from city staff in the TAG meeting, as Annie mentioned yesterday, and really looking forward to working with you all and your constituents as we go forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And that is the entirety of my CEO report.
Good. Anna Olivia, Community Advisory Report.
Thank you. So we very much want to extend a warm welcome, and we are thrilled that JP is joining us. So we had our meeting on Monday, and two non-agenda item issues came up. One is in light of having some new Community Advisory Committee members, in light of having some new board members, and a ever-growing number of engaged and interested community members, we will be hosting a really informal study session on the early action opportunities that are outlined and selected with staff from the local development business plan. That will be happening on Monday, the 28th, from 7 to 9 p.m. We're working on securing a location. It is just a reminder or a refresher about what the different product options are and what our local opportunities are before we get the updated budget information, just as a refresher for anyone who is interested in learning about what our local options are, recognizing that we won't be able to do all of them. And the second item is that we had received a request from AL and East Bay Clean Power Alliance to have a further discussion around the PCIA, and so we had agendized it. We received the letter that the board has in front of them now, and the advisory committee was really strong in recognizing that the PCIA ruling is an immediate and serious threat to community choice, and to the specific and unique mission of EBCE to innovate towards a just energy transition in Alameda County. And as such, the Community Advisory Committee really wants to call upon the board to make a plan and to take action in the interest of Alameda County ratepayers to oppose the PCIA ruling, and to really recognize that you as individuals, as elected officials, and as your cities and our county have a lot of power and sway, and to really advocate for the promises that we have made to our community. That's all.
Any questions? Director Harrigan?
So my question was, I looked at the annotated agenda that you provided and noted that the CAC calls on the board to make a plan and take action to oppose the PCIA ruling. And I was curious if you are aware of any other actions other CCAs are taking in response to the PCIA ruling. I know that there were some specific asks in the letter that we received, and one of them is potentially taking legal action. That's something we'd have to discuss with our legal counsel. There's also a request to support a forthcoming campaign by the California Alliance for Community Energy to demand that CPUC's decision be suspended. I was just wondering if it was discussed at the CAC meeting, or if you're aware of what other actions other CCAs are taking in response to the PCIA decision.
as opposed to specifically endorsing the actions in the letter, there was quite a lot of support for the sentiments in the letter, for sure. There was also strong feeling that this is a rapidly changing environment that we're working in, and that we trust and respect the leadership shown by our staff. And so the opportunities that are going to be coming up, we trust that the staff, who has been doing an excellent job in really advocating around this, but the ask was more of you as individuals, as board members, as cities and our county, to support those efforts of staff in however they will be playing out, because this is all changing really quickly, but to really use your voice and to weigh in. We've had individuals on this board and other cities and CCAs around the state weighing in on the decision, but we would just encourage folks to really use your voice in conjunction with the recommendations of staff to support what they are advocating for.
Just note in closing, the letter from the East Bay Clean Power Alliance notes potential bill AB 56, which sounds very problematic, and I don't know whether we've officially weighed in on that, but assuming that that goes forward, that's something we should certainly take a position on. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else that way? Anybody else this way? Okay, thank you, and Olivia. Move to item 12, regulatory and legislative update.
All right, so this evening I'm going to talk through some recent updates in the regulatory arena. The first one is regarding the ERA forecast proceeding. This is the proceeding that, if you recall from the last meeting, we talked about would set the rates for PG&E's customers for their generation rate. It also sets the PCIA rate that our customers will be subject to. So in terms of trying to understand what is the PCIA, what is the rate that we're competing against, it's a very key proceeding. It was originally scheduled for the January 10th commission meeting, and at the last minute, at that meeting, Commissioner Guzman-Aceves actually held the item without comment. So the next chance that it could be voted out is at the January 31st CPUC meeting. In the interim, we could see a revision from the administrative law judge, from a commissioner issuing an alternate proposed decision. We have been communicating the need to do a Brown Power true-up for 2018, which would be beneficial for our customers in terms of the PCIA, and so it's possible that that issue has gotten some traction and that that's something that the commissioner is looking at more closely. We've also been in conversation with the Energy Division staff, who's had some questions about our Brown Power true-up proposal. So we've been spending some time with them, helping them understand how this could work. So all I can say right now is we'll see if the commission decides to do something different than what they had in their original proposed decision. And then in terms of implementation, I think Annie already mentioned that we'd probably see a decision being implemented in March. I would even say maybe even April, given the delay at this point. The next proceeding I wanted to cover is resource adequacy, and you may recall that in this proceeding there was a proposed decision issued that would establish the distribution utility, so in our case PG&E, as the full central buyer for this product that we have to buy called local resource adequacy, or RA. This proposed decision, we were able to build a coalition of folks that were heavily opposed to this proposed decision. We had ratepayer advocates, CCAs, developers. Even recently we saw a letter from the CAISO, the independent system operator. So at this point, nearly everybody, aside from I think 2 of the 3 utilities, had been opposed to what the commission had issued as a proposed decision. We've had countless all-party we participated in an all-party meeting, and we've had countless ex parte meetings with the different commissioners' offices. And then the commissioners themselves had a closed session rate-setting deliberative meeting on January 8th. Subsequently, this was taken off of the agenda for the January 10th meeting and has been held by staff. We don't know how long it's going to be held. We don't know what's going to happen next. I would warrant that it's likely that it will be revised given the strong opposition and PG&E's credit status. So stay tuned. Again, this was one we were very concerned about, but I think that we're going to see an evolution here. Two other regulatory proceedings that I wanted to bring to your attention. One is PG&E's general rate case application. They filed this application in December, and protests are due tomorrow, so we expect to intervene with a coalition of CCAs protesting their application. That essentially makes us a party to the proceeding. Over the next 18 months, we'll have the opportunity to weigh in on their proposals. The reason that it matters is because certain costs that we pay or that our customers pay are determined through this general rate case. The other reason that it matters is because this is where the utility decides what costs of theirs should be generation, what costs of theirs should be distribution. And so we want to make sure that, for competitive reasons, that they're appropriately categorizing those costs. We don't want them subsidizing their generation customers by making all of us pay it as a distribution charge. So it's an important case for us to be intervening in. They mentioned in their filing that depending on their financial status, they may be updating their original application. The schedule could change. So given that everything's in flux right now, I don't know how long this case is actually going to take. There could be some pretty major changes, but at least we're going to be a player. And then finally, there's another investigation. This investigation's actually been ongoing for a few years, but again, in December, President Picker extended a new phase of the safety culture investigation proceeding, and this one is looking at how, if PG&E should be restructured in order to ensure its safe operation. So we have filed a motion for party status, and we're expecting to file comments that respond to some of the questions that were asked by the commissioner. And I have on there January 30th, but that's actually been pushed out a couple weeks. So we'll be filing those comments on February 13th. I think that's it, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Let's see what you got. Any questions? Director Pilch.
Could you explain Brown Power True-Up, please?
Sure. So essentially, the PCIA decision that we received last fall now requires us to look at the forecast of Brown Power, which gives us the price that we pay in the PCIA, and then what was actually paid for that Brown Power, and true up the difference. So the idea was that this would make the PCIA more fair, because instead of using a forecasted price, you're actually using the actual price. So you're still using the forecasted price to set rates initially because you don't have your actual price, but then you true that up at a later date. And what we saw in 2018 was that Brown Power prices were much higher than forecast. And when Brown Power prices are high, it actually brings down the over-market cost of the PCIA. So PCIA, you're always paying over-market costs. If the market is higher, your over-market costs are lower. So it's an offsetting calculation.
I just want to make one point. This is actually in somewhat reference to the comment about what are we doing about the PCIA? And we've talked spent a lot of time this fall on the PCIA and how detrimental the PCIA changes would be to a CCA. This is what we're doing. The work that our team in particular has done over the last 2 months, I think, has really been instrumental in building the basis for a potential addition of the Brown Power True-Up. To put it in context, when we talked about this in December at our budget, the Brown Power True-Up is worth potentially $20 million in 2019 to East Bay Community Energy. It would have a very significant offsetting effect of any increases to the PCIA. So, sometimes I think these are the kinds of things that are kind of a little bit like below the surface in terms of like the things that are being done. But the fact that this is possible right now is very promising, and to us it reflects the fact that the commission is starting to get the message.
No. Director Arreguín?
Thank you. Well, that's very encouraging, and I really appreciate your advocacy in that process. It's early in the legislative process, but I was curious if there were any bills that have caught your interest that might be relevant.
Yeah, I think you mentioned one bill that had caught our interest, and that is the bill being sponsored by San Diego Gas and Electric. At this early stage, it hasn't yet gotten much traction in Sacramento, so we're still trying to figure out if that bill is going to get some interest and determine whether or not we need to take a position, as well as monitor how it evolves.
And I know there were a couple of bills that were pretty high-profile bills that were introduced last session, including the regionalization bill. And do we have any sense of whether those are going to come back this year?
It kind of depends on who you talk to, but I've heard that regionalization is not terribly likely this year.
Okay, thank you.
Director Kalb?
Thank you. Did you mention the timing for the PCIA Phase 2? Because we are obviously going to be engaged in that. Is that starting already?
The PCIA Phase 2, they had an initial pre-hearing conference, and we are still awaiting a scoping memo and ruling by the administrative law judge. That was actually expected a couple weeks ago. I think given everything that's going on, it's understandable that we haven't seen one yet. It's a little bit hard to say whether that proceeding will get slowed down.
Thank you.
Dr. Mandel?
Thank you. Just a reminder to use our member agencies to to amplify our voice, whether that's a draft letter, sample letter for the mayors to write, send off quickly with our position articulated, or a sample resolution for our council to pass. I know in Hayward we have authorized our mayor to engage on issues that protect our rights as members of EBCE, so it doesn't even require council action for her to do that. Okay. I would encourage other cities to take that step as well, so that our mayors can respond quickly with EBCE's assistance in those sort of sample letters.
Great, thank you.
It's also a good way to make sure that every council member in each city is sort of aware of these issues, because we'll see those and be informed as a result of it, and then take that off and hopefully advocate with our legislative, friends and contacts. So, thank you.
Great. We look forward to working with them.
You might want to stress that you did say that the mayors and that they work, and council members or whoever on this board works with staff. I don't want everybody running in different directions.
Okay, that was the core of my point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Got off easy tonight. Okay. Item 3, change to the administrative procurement policy. Item 13. Had a 3 in it.
So this, you saw the administrative procurement policy a year ago, and then it was modified last summer. It came to our attention that our policy actually called for race and gender scoring preferences, which is a violation of, or could be a violation of Prop 209. And while we encourage diversity, we cannot give scoring preference. And so our intent is to work with our member agencies to figure out how they bring diverse applicants and bidders into their process, but to remove it at this, or to request that you remove it at this point from our policy.
Okay, so we have one speaker on this item, Jessica Tovar. Saw you on TV the other day yelling at the PUC.
Okay, better. So one of the things the East Bay Clean Power Alliance is concerned about, and actually has a question about, is we understand that the county uses SLEB, the Small Local Emerging Business criteria for hiring, and we want to know why we can't use this in our contracting and hiring. So that's the question I wanted to pose. We're obviously, what we're trying to do is create these opportunities to workers, people who are traditionally shut out of the clean energy economy. Certainly, you know, having such criteria would give those opportunities to people who are not given or have, you know, that opportunity before. So we want to know why that can't be used. Thanks.
Leah, do you want to respond?
So we still have preferences for Alameda County businesses and union labor. And small, you can give preferences to small businesses, local businesses. You cannot give preferences based on color, gender, or sexual preference.
Any other questions?
Yes,
question? Jesse, is that your light?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So the recommendation from the CAC, which I think is a good one, is absent a specific race or gender preference that we increase our outreach around opportunities. And that shouldn't be a specific policy, but that should be something that we consider adopting as practice. So I just wanted to say I support the CAC's recommendation. I think that's something we should consider adopting as practice. Thank you.
Director Allred?
So quite specifically on that, we did want to encourage staff to really focus on outreach into areas that might not be regular methods. There were some specific recommendations around different chambers of commerce and East Bay Women in Business and those kinds of things. But also I heard staff talking about doing in-language workshops and having some mechanism available that if communities want to find out about things, that there is an easy mechanism to submit those opportunities and to really focus on building an outreach model that does very targeted outreach into the communities in our county who we have been developing this agency specifically to help drive benefits there. Thank you.
Director Hernandez.
Thank you. Through the chair, to the council, a quick question clarifying. You say we can't give preference, so there's a process to give preference. And I think that's through a disparity analysis. Through the city of San Leandro, I've brought that forward to talk about how can we look to give potential preference if it's being underrepresented. So through that process, there are steps to get through a disparity analysis, but you still want to start measuring how are you awarding bids, what are those check boxes that are being created to start measuring if you have a balanced approach to awarding bids, who's getting them, so you can start doing the analysis in the future to understand if there is a disparity in your awards of contracts and what are we doing to manage that disparity. So understanding that is important, but you can't really do that analysis without having the data. So it doesn't mean you have to take off the check boxes, and you can't give preference unless you've seen that there is unbalance. And through that disparity analysis that can be done, it's quite cost prohibitive. The work would be done to understand who is getting the awards, what's their backgrounds, and getting that data in place to possibly look at potential disparity in the future. And we can put you in touch with my city attorney and his office, who's done some of that work already, and we're starting building the information or the work to understand who is getting the awards, have that database set up, understanding what that looks like, and then coming back to the board here and say, there is an imbalance. We can do something about it now. So that's how you would possibly give preference if there is preferential treatment in one way or the other. So I just want to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director May.
So I was just going to comment. I know earlier we were talking about marketing and outreach, and when I look at some of the correspondences that I've been receiving regarding inquiry into EBCE, a lot of times they're on different social media platforms or specific to ethnic groups. And if you're trying to create more awareness, I think it would help a lot to do some of the outreach in those opportunities. Like, for example, I'll use the app discussion just because it's a little touchy right now, but WeChat, for example, is one of the areas that I get a lot of inquiries off of from or WhatsApp, depending on the different ethnic groups. And then as well as just in general right now with certain holidays coming up, there are a lot of activities. And so if we even just create some awareness in these different ethnic publications, I think that will quell and answer some of the questions about why people have seen changes in their bills and other things. And so while we're doing a great outreach, and I think that Twitter and some Facebook are some excellent mechanisms, I think some of my communities, such as the Afghan community and other ones, still are more comfortable with their publications. And so if we could just make sure to be sensitive to that, we can leverage opportunities within our own community. We have outreach and partnerships with them regularly at our Fremont Family Resource Center or other places that we could utilize. Thank you.
Anybody else this way? Going back that way?
So I move the staff recommendation.
You what?
I move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. I have a motion by Ergen, seconded by Pilch. Is there any objection to the motion? Motion will pass without objection. We'll move to item 14.
Hello? Yes.
Hello.
Hi, I'm here to provide you an update on the demand response pilot program that we conducted in the summer of 2018. So the board approved a pilot demand response program at the May board meeting in 2018. The impetus for that program was that PG&E offers what's known as peak day pricing, a demand response program for commercial and industrial customers, and that program is not transferable to CCA customers. So we had anecdotal evidence that some customers were potentially going to opt out because the credit that they had budgeted and had benefited from in the past from participating in that program was going to go away. So the board approved the demand response program, and we implemented the program this summer. The objectives were to retain customers that otherwise would have potentially opted out, to learn from the practice of running a program, what it would take. Demand response is one of the key recommendations of the local development business plan, so we thought it would be a great way for us to learn how to actually run a demand response program. And finally, we decided to do it, and what we proposed and what was approved was to do it in a way that wasn't just going to give away the credit to the customers without providing them a demand response signal, which is what other CCAs have done. We instead decided we were going to actually notify customers, tell them that there was a demand response event and that they were encouraged to reduce their consumption so that they could maximize their credits. So we followed the PG&E structure for the program, including notification, but we set up the entire process internally. So we first held webinars and reached out to customers to present the program offering. We then actually set up the systems in place to notify customers via email and text messages of the program events, and then we calculated the impact of the program participation. So in the next slide, you'll see that we ultimately called 8 events, and we had 8 participants in the program. Oh, sorry, I can do the next slide. There we go. So we had 8 service agreements that were enrolled. We had originally limited this to 100, and I can provide more context on our enrollment, and we called 8 events. PG&E actually called 9 events. We called 1 less event due to a lack of time for us to provide the proper notification to our customers. The chart that you see there shows you in blue the standard load shape of the participants during non-event days, and in red the relative load shape during events. What's important to notice is that during those key event hours, primarily the afternoon, that the red line is below the blue line. So the customers, by this data, seem to clearly be responding to event days. When there is an event, they actually reduce their load even further. So overall, we were able to run the program and to credit out $100,000 to our participants. I think our original budget that was presented was up to $450,000, so we fell within that budget. And the upshot of the program for us was really we were really able to retain some key top 10 customers, some customers that in fact in some cases opted up to our Brilliant 100 product as opposed to staying with our Bright Choice product, because they loved the idea that they could stick to their budget, pay the same exact amount for energy as they would have with PG&E, but be 100% GHG free suddenly. So that was something that was very fortuitous for us. We also learned the mechanisms of running a demand response program, and we obviously got some demand response benefit out of that. So some of those hours where the events were called were hours where the spot market prices reached 3 digits, I think all the way up to $600 a megawatt hour. So those are very extreme prices. So we haven't been able to quantify necessarily what that value is, but we know that there is some value associated with having been able to reduce demand during those critical hours. And obviously there is value for the state of California in general in the sense that we help with grid reliability by reducing demand during peak hours. We learned a lot by doing the program. For example, we learned that sticking to PG&E's process for calling events is not necessarily the right approach. PG&E called less events than they normally do. We're not entirely sure why, but we decided we were going to do it exactly the same way as PG&E, so we ended up calling about half as many events as we could have called. Every time we call an event, it's more penalties for a customer, effectively, because penalties only get incurred when an event is called. So we've learned some great lessons through the program, and we are planning to use those lessons and to work within the context of the local development business plan to look at options for expanding our demand response offerings. Thank you.
Questions? Questions either way. You got off. Good job. Okay, so thank you. We'll move to item 15. It's an action item. 15.
Our EBCE office lease. So we, about a year ago, we moved into our current location at 1111 Broadway, which is in a WeWork, which is a shared office space. We have our own office space, but it's a shared environment where you rent office space by the desk. We've been there for a year, and
we know where we're at.
Okay, so as the team has grown, we've found we're at a point now where we need to make the step to the next office space, and so we've gone through. We've been conducting an exhaustive search over the last 6 months, looking at sites across Alameda County. Really with a set of core criteria that we brought and discussed at our November meeting. Those criteria were proximity to BART, really important for us to be able to be in a location where our community can easily get there by public transit. We want to have a space that is sufficiently large to support up to 40 or so staff. We want a space that's large enough to be able to host our community meetings, subcommittee meetings, executive committee meetings, and we want a cost that was within our budget. As a frame of reference, our budget set a cost of roughly $40,000 a month for this fiscal year. So those were the 4 approved criteria from the board. In addition to those, staff really wanted to focus on finding a space with a shorter term lease. What our needs today, our needs next year, our needs even in 2 years, I expect to be quite different than our needs over the long term. As we think about bringing customer service in-house, as we think about growing our programmatic team, we're going to need potentially a much larger space. So finding something that had a 3-4 year lease term was really a high priority. Unfortunately, that meant that we were really looking for a sublease as opposed to entering into a new lease. There's a lot less supply for subleases than there are for new full leases. So with those criteria, in this memo, I have a list of kind of the top properties, You'll see that there were spaces generally in the 7,000 to 10,000 square foot range, generally in the $3 to $5 a square foot price range. Again, as I mentioned, the big problem that we ran into was it was very challenging to find anything that really had under a 7-year lease. So with that criteria, we really wanted to have shorter term. We landed on a property actually right across the street from our current office, 1212 Broadway. It's right on top of the 12th Street BART station. It's the entire second floor of that building. It's a sublease for 4 years, priced at $3.85 a square foot. Comparatively to the rest of downtown Oakland, downtown Berkeley, and downtown Fremont, that was actually very well priced. It's more expensive as relates to some of the spaces that we observed in Dublin, though. But again, this was one of the very few subleases that we saw that also was adjacent to a BART station. So the recommendation is we've gone through this search. We want to start the process of negotiating a lease agreement with this property, and then we are recommending bringing back the final lease agreement to the executive committee for final approval.
Okay, questions? Director Cobb.
All right, this is not one of the new buildings, office buildings in Oakland. So did you ask about seismic retrofit? I mean, a lot of these concrete or older buildings, office buildings, are not what one might call the totally up to standards one might want. Some are, some aren't. Did you ask that question?
You know, I did not ask a question specifically about seismic retrofit. The suite itself has been redone. The current master tenant took the space 2 years ago, and they did very significant tenant improvements. So it is a modern looking space. They are also redoing the entranceway. So in the next number of months, it will have a modern looking entrance. Yeah. But no, we did not talk about seismic.
It's worth asking the building owner.
Yeah.
What's been done for the entire building in the past 10, 15 years?
Director Carlin?
I was just wondering, you talked about a price and the length of time and so on. What's left to negotiate?
Well, so those are your key business terms.
Sure.
But there are legal terms in a sublease agreement. Okay. We're still negotiating some elements around what the security deposit would be, what the burn on the security deposit might be.
Okay.
What is the limit on, this is a fully inclusive, so, our electricity, water, etc.
Okay.
There are some provisions around how much that can grow per year for the term of the lease. So
right.
Those are sort of secondary business terms.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Olivia.
Well, the CAC does not have an opinion about where the office will be located. We did want to raise a concern, as one of the criterion was that the space be large enough to host the Community Advisory Committee meetings, that we quite specifically hold our meetings in Central County and do not want to start hosting all of our meetings in Oakland. In June or July, 3 of our seats will be up, and we'll be looking to recruit new Community Advisory Committee members. We've had not as much luck recruiting people from like Livermore and whatnot, and asking them to make a trek all the way out to Oakland every month is a large enough commitment that at least one member of our committee said that they would step down. We have, as part of our operating procedures, that will be in Central County, and then only once every 3 or 4 months go to each of the different parts of the district so that it is accessible to all community members. But wherever the office ends up, we want to make sure that our meetings can maintain accessible to all parts of the county and not just be Oakland-centric.
Okay, thank you, Director Aldrin. Anybody else?
Yes. One more try.
Director Hernandez.
Thank you. I think I heard you say, CEO, it's full service. That means you're all in, $385. There's no additional operating expenses, but there are provisions for increases in subsequent years. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, so we're negotiating those provisions right now. They're limited. I think right now, it will be a few percent. We're negotiating over how many percent, but it will be a few percent at most.
Perfect. And to the CSA's concern, is there opportunity to still work with WeWork and to hold the agreement opportunity to use some space there across the street? It seems like you have some room there in the budget to possibly have that as a needed basis.
Yes. I think the concern is about, though, continuing to have the CAC meetings in Hayward and around the county. And I think our view is we want a space that is big enough to accommodate, and then we will work with the CAC to sort of arrive at, a system that works best for everyone, that accommodates as much public participation as possible. But having a space that's that large, I think there will be some benefits.
Thank you.
So Nick, I heard your reply to Director Kalb that it's a nice, it's a nice workspace. It was recently done. It's very modern and all that, but in a 6.0 earthquake, that doesn't really matter. So in my opinion, we can tentatively approve this, but I would say that if it has not been retrofitted, you should probably come back to the board. That's my opinion. I would want to hear from anybody else, but it's really nice if it looks good now, but when it's a pile of rubble, it might not look that nice, and we need to be operational. We can't have any downtime, and nor can we have staff in an unsafe building, to be very clear. So that's my feeling. I don't know if anybody else wants to. Director Venacci?
Yes, I just want to say I concur with that. I think earthquake safety is very, very important. And maybe, I don't know how that factored into the cost at least, because if somebody doesn't have that retrofit, then their charge per square foot would probably be less anyway.
So does Director Carlin?
Yeah, I'm an alternate, so I don't often come to these meetings, but I was here at the meeting when it was discussed about the location and moving the office space. And I guess I'm concerned, and I agree with the comment made earlier, that I thought we discussed rather extensively back in November, I think you said the meeting was, about having it centrally located. And I think there was a concern here that it was going to end up in Oakland no matter what. And it sounds like it has. So I guess I'm a little concerned that, I heard you talk about Fremont in Oakland. One other city you mentioned, I don't remember. Dublin. But I didn't hear anything about San Leandro or some of the other cities that are more central. And I guess I'm a little concerned that we haven't heard more about the analysis in terms of looking for those spaces in those locations.
For San Leandro and Hayward, the survey that was conducted for Hayward, part of the criteria was the closeness to the BART station. There's a lot of office space in Hayward. The office space is not within a quarter mile of the BART station here. So here in downtown Hayward, you have shopping, restaurants, but you really don't have office space. So we were unable to find a suitable site here. In San Leandro, we did visit some sites. The sites we visited, one did offer a sublease, but it was not, I think, suitable for our needs. And the other site we visited, or that we surveyed, did not offer a sublease. So there's the tech center in right adjacent to the San Leandro BART station, and that is really interesting office space, but 7-year minimum term.
Director Hernandez?
So did you happen to look at Dublin by any chance? Because I know that we have 2 BART stations, there's office space available, and Whole Foods right across the street.
We did include Dublin in the survey, and again, the issue there was the availability of a sublease. So these are the spaces that we included in the survey, that we found in the survey, were all 7-year term. So
did you happen to reach out to our economic development?
We did not.
Okay.
I
would just suggest you do that, because I'm sure that you could probably find something there. And it is close to transit.
Okay. All right, anybody else?
Yep.
Director May?
That was the same question that I had, is that I know, apologize, that I was just curious if you had worked with economic development, because we have shared workspace in other areas, especially near our 2 BART stations, and we have an opportunity zone too. So that's why I was just wondering.
No, we did not, but we can do some outreach and see if there are any other spaces there.
To reach out and let her know that she will be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Melissa and I are down here arguing. I have a question. Go ahead, Director Collins.
So we have, how many staff do we have right now?
19.
19 staff, and presumably we will grow to some extent, 20, 30, maybe more, right? So where our staff live, who work every day, just about, and where our pool of staff might come from seems to me would be a overwhelming factor in your decision process, not the once a month when we each come. That's my thought. So I say San Leandro would have been great, but it sounds like it's not going to work. So I know I'm biased because I'm in Oakland, but I don't care about me, I care about our staff. And I don't know if they're all going to go to Dublin every day. It's a nice place. So is Fremont. They're all good places. But if they mostly live up here, or in San Francisco even, that's discouragement for getting a lot of our current and new staff.
And it is true that the majority of our staff live in from Berkeley to San. I think all of our staff who live in Alameda County live between Berkeley and San Lorenzo, and then we have staff who live in San Francisco and Contra Costa County. But I would say Oakland is probably the city with the highest density of EBC staff. So that certainly is part of the consideration for why 1212 Broadway is, we think is the most suitable site for us at this point.
Just real quick before I call on Director Mandel, I'm really concerned, and that's what Melissa and I were kind of going over. These 4 addresses that you show for Dublin are not in Dublin. They're in Pleasanton.
We don't want Pleasanton, they're not members.
Yeah, we don't want to be in Pleasanton either. that really would be stupid. Okay, so I'm a little concerned about that these are Dublin addresses. Are not Dublin addresses.
All of these addresses, so we have engaged a commercial real estate broker. And so the commercial real estate broker, we asked them to identify office space from the 7 to 10,000 square foot range within walking distance from BART that was currently available. So all these addresses were pulled by our commercial real estate broker given these criteria.
Yeah, and you know what, I apologize, I misread it. This report is broken down by BART stations.
Yes, exactly. So these are we did not put the criteria specifically.
Yeah, these are not Dublin these are not Dublin addresses. They are Pleasanton, but they're close to the Dublin Pleasanton BART station.
Yes.
Okay, but they're still in
Pleasanton, so
which is a non-member. Mandel?
Thank you, Chair. So I agree with a lot of the sentiment being expressed up here about the location. And for the ultimate office, the long-term one, I would expect a lot of these sort of concerns that are being raised to be investigated much more deeply. But we're looking at a short-term lease here, and given, we only have one option listed here that is in less than 5 years that fits, I'm okay with saying, look, let our CEO and staff focus on the other big things that are on the plate right now. Give them authority for these to negotiate this site. But in 3 or 4 years when you come back, listen very carefully to the board at that time and find some options in the areas that you hear the board pushing you to look for. And hopefully there'll be one then that fits as our long-term home that is in a central location. So I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Well, okay, if you do that, I don't know if I can support it, because I think, right now, we don't know what time the earthquake's going to hit. And Loma Prieta happened, around 4 o'clock? And we could have people in these buildings. And I do want to kind of glean on to what Kolb mentioned, that if this building is not earthquake safe, I don't care. I don't want people in it. I don't want our staff in it. And we can find other buildings. So I think that needs to be a part of the motion, that the building needs to be earthquake retrofitted, and that we can, or at least ask Nick to return and then continue to justify why we should go in a non-retrofitted building.
So I accept that as part of the motion, and I would point out that the second part is to come back to the executive committee for final approval, at which point we'll have an answer to that and can say.
I know, but your motion didn't state that, so I just want to.
Yeah,
okay.
Yep, it's a good
so there's the motion that does
it.
include the earthquake issue, the earthquake retrofit. Nick, just one other question, huh? Okay, second. Is there a second? Second. Second by Martinez. Nick, why just back to the executive committee?
It was to give, if we wanted to execute the agreement before the end of February, we would have the ability to bring an agreement forward in, say, 2 weeks, if we are able to.
I don't know. I have a concern about taking things like this. This is a rather large expenditure and pushing it to the executive committee, but if everybody's happy about it, we can do that. So that's in the motion. So, Pilch?
Yeah, just a quick remark. I think that bringing back the data to the board and or the executive committee is a good idea. Maybe that none of these buildings are seismically retrofitted, but it would be good to know that. But I do want to support Director Kolb's remarks about the importance of attracting and retaining staff. If staff is going to, if that's the central location, if Oakland or somewhere similar is the location where is the central location where staff is going to be attracted to, I think that's a very important consideration as well.
I think that's important direction, but I think he's the one hiring them, and he's hiring all these Oakland and San Francisco people. And I would only point out that Livermore has the largest concentration of PhDs in the Bay Area. So, there's nothing wrong with being down there too, because there's a lot of smart people down there too. Okay. So with that, I have a motion, and I'm sorry, Director Kolb, or Director Pilch, you said you were okay with it going to the committee? Okay. All right, is there any objection to the motion?
I object.
Okay, there you go. Well, there we go, we got 2. Okay, so far the motion passes with 2 objections, Director Carlin and Director Rude. All right, okay, we'll move on to the audit, item 16.
Item 16 is related to our audited financials. Let me just start off with some brief remarks to highlight some items in the financial statements themselves, and then I'll invite our auditor, Brett Bradford from Pizzeni and Brinker, to provide his assessment of the audit and the latest status. So at this stage, we've completed our audited financials for 2 years. That's fiscal years June 30th, 2017 and June 30th, 2018. A couple things that I'll just note. In 2017, as part of the pre-operational phase, are really a buildup of liabilities, of course, prior to any revenues coming in. And then for 2018, that includes 11 months that are pre-revenue, and then 1 month, which is the month of June 2018, where we began our operations. So that's sort of a partial month of revenue coming in there. In terms of the audited financials themselves, we prepared these in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. They include a typical sort of management discussion and analysis, statement of net position, which includes EBC's assets, liabilities, and net position. It includes a statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, our income statement. And then third, our statement of cash flows. And then, of course, it includes sort of typical notes to the basic financial statements for each of those. I'll just highlight a few brief numbers, and then I'll hand it off to Brett to discuss. In terms of our balance sheet, in fiscal year June 30th, 2017, we had a negative net position of $1.8 million. And then as of the end of fiscal year June 30th, 2018, we had a net position positive of approximately $3.1 million. That's related to our balance sheet. In terms of our income statement, our operating revenues for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017, again, were primarily made up of liabilities and expenses, and so we had a negative operating revenues of $1.8 million approximately. And for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018, which incorporated our first month of operating revenues, we came in at roughly $16 million with operating expenses of close to $11 million. And so our net income for the period, June 30th, 2018, was just shy of $5 million. Lastly, I'll just note our cash position as of June 30th, 2018 was approximately $4.3 million. With that, I'll hand it over to Brett to highlight his assessment of the financials and controls.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be back again. Looks like we're having some technical. Here we go. There we go. Very good. So last time that I was here, I reported on a tentative basis. We were very near completion of the audit. And now we're reporting on a final basis, so not much has changed in my presentation, but as ever, one of the main purposes is for me to answer, of course, any questions and share information, so please feel free to interrupt me at any time. Keeping all that in mind, the slideshow is very similar to last time, whereas we anticipate reporting this based on our preliminary findings. Now we have reported, so on, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a quick one on myself. So given all that, I'll go through these fairly quickly since it's revisiting some similar slides from last time, but please interrupt me if I'm going too fast or if you have any questions. Just to revisit the relative roles and responsibilities, management's responsible for preparing the financial statements and establishing a system of internal control. As Howard mentioned, our management prepares the financial statements, and that's essential because we wouldn't be independent if we were preparing the financial statements. And then it's our job to do the audit of the financial statements. Then we do that by considering the risk of material misstatement in the financial statements. We look at internal controls, perform tests of year-end balances, and we evaluate the adequacy of the disclosures in the financials as well. And like I said, the audit is complete at this time, and we've reported an unqualified opinion. And that means that based on our audit, the financials are materially stated correctly based on the procedures we performed. And then also importantly, we didn't identify any significant deficiencies in internal control. So that would be a significant deficiency as defined by the auditing standards as one that would be important enough or materially significant enough that we would need to bring that to the attention of the board. Our significant areas of focus for the year. We take a look at the organization's processes and procedures for entering into various types of financial transactions and the controls surrounding those transactions. Revenue recognition is very important, and that means looking at cutoff and accrued revenue, which primarily was where the revenue was residing this year, given that just the tail end of the year had been entered into in terms of actual operations of sale of electricity. And then looking at cutoff as well to make sure all the associated expenses and the energy costs are accumulated and presented in the financial statements as well. Cash, we primarily look at that by confirming with the financial institutions directly and the County of Alameda and the banks that the organization was involved with during the periods presented, and making sure that the accrued cost of electricity is adequate. That means that everything that was used up through the balance sheet dates was presented and captured in the costs. Notes payable, we confirm those directly. And then, like I said, we also look at the financial statement note disclosures and make sure they're complete and without bias. These are a few required board communications were required under the auditing standards to make these. A few years ago, the AICPA said auditors aren't really talking enough with boards and communicating enough essential issues, so they imposed some of these. Some of these sound a little redundant, but such are the requirements that we're looking at here. We being the auditors, that is. The significant accounting policies adopted by the organization throughout the periods audited appeared appropriate and consistently applied. There was nothing unusual there in that regard. There weren't any alternative treatments of accounting principles for material items in the financial statements that we discussed with management. That means there was no opportunity to select different accounting approaches that may have caused the financial statements to introduce the opportunity for exercising or showing a bias in the presentation of the financial statements. We didn't propose any adjustments to the financial statements. That's good. The accounting was done correctly based on our audit, and we didn't see anything that was significant enough where we'd actually had to propose an adjustment that would cause a change in the numbers. We did not identify any significant or unusual transactions or applications of accounting principles where a lack of authoritative guidance exists. That means that the organization didn't go out on a limb anywhere, again, that might introduce the opportunity for bias to come into play in the preparation of the financial statements. This is also a good one. There were no disagreements with management concerning the scope of our audits, the application of accounting principles, or the basis for management's judgments on any significant matters. And we did not encounter any difficulties in dealing with management during the performance of our audits. That concludes my slides.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I have one, maybe for council. Why is this an informational item? It seems to me that we should be voting. Is this coming back again, or is this it? Or I don't know. It seems to me that we should be voting on something like this.
The full audit comes back for review, but you can't accept or deny it. The audit is what it is.
Well, shouldn't we receive and file or something? It seems like there should be some action. If we just and go away, I mean, that seems kind of dumb.
Through the chair, there should be a record that we officially acknowledged we received it and heard it, and I think that's what the chair is saying.
Right. I mean, I get we couldn't deny it. I understand that, but it seems like it just kind of goes into the Ethernet. We didn't do anything. There was maybe no questions. So I'm concerned. I actually think, if anything, it should be held over for a vote at the next meeting. If it's just receive and file.
We can do that.
I mean, this isn't overly timely, correct?
So, through the chair,
go ahead.
So for that, would it then just be brought back as an item? It's just an accepted. Received and accepted. Yeah.
I mean, at least there's just some sort of acknowledgement that.
Oh no, I agree with you. And thinking about it at the city level, we would accept it. Yeah.
I don't know how the other cities operate.
We usually have a committee that looks at it before.
Right. We had a committee that worked on it. Duccio Vernacci, myself, worked on it, a few times, but I don't think we want full responsibility. So I think what we'll do is we'll hold this over for a vote and notice it as a receive and file, at least, so there can be a vote on that. Okay? And you don't have to come back. I don't think there'll be any questions.
Only if the weather's better.
Huh?
Only if the weather's better.
Okay. Are there any questions right now?
Quick question, procedure.
Go ahead, Director.
The presentation you just presented, I'm not able to find it anywhere. Is that something that you send over to staff and staff would then provide it 24, 48 hours before this meeting? I just want to understand that. I might be new, but I just want to see, where do we see these presentations? Do we just put them on the website ourselves? Where are they at?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first part of your question?
The presentation you just presented for my records to present back to city?
The slideshow?
The slide deck, yes. I have the report, but not the presentation. So for me, at least it would be good to get this information 24 or 48 hours in advance so I can review it, prepare, and ask questions. I'm new again, just recently as an alternate, but I saw that in the last presentation for the legislative update. I had to pull it from a different site. So I'm just curious how we should be receiving these presentations so we can be informed as well.
I think it was just a timing issue with when it was received to distribute it, but it will be posted online with the item. And also the attachment to this item is separate because it's a secured document.
Okay. So should we expect and give direction to consultants to provide this presentation at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting so we can be distributed? I'm just curious about how we actually get it.
Maybe I'll just note that that's definitely the intention, is to typically provide materials ahead of time so there's appropriate, adequate time for board members to review. In this case, there was a little bit of oversight, and I'll certainly take blame for that, for not providing it earlier. It was a presentation that was previously given, so we sort of it just overlooked posting it, but it will be posted online for review afterwards.
Yeah, thank you. You have a lot of good comments in there, so thank you very much. Thank you.
A little bit of growing pains, and I apologize as the chair that I didn't recognize that this was on as an informational item. So if we could just bring it back, I'm sure it can be on consent as a receive and file. Would probably work. It doesn't need a big to-do, but I do think that it needs some sort of acknowledgement from the board that we've heard the item, we've asked questions, and we're ready to look forward to the next year. Okay? So there will be no action on this one. We'll move to item 17, the Treasurer's Report.
Item 17 is also an informational item. I'll highlight some items related to EBC's cash position. And this is focused on quarter end, December 31st, 2018. In the quarter, EBC maintained a positive cash balance throughout each month. And I've highlighted the account balances for all of the open and active bank accounts that we currently have and manage. So they're all held under River City Bank. We have a number of accounts, 7 accounts in total, 3 accounts of which have balances. The first is the internal operations account with a balance of $213,229.16 as of December 31st, 2018. For the operating fund account, we have a positive balance of $45,895,995.58. And then we have our lockbox account, which includes in it a $5 million reserve amount, and that total is a positive balance of $8,843,138.67. All of the other balances for the remainder of the accounts, as you can see, are $0 as of December 31st, 2018. The next, I'll highlight our cash received into our lockbox throughout the quarter ending December 31st. In October, November, December, you can see all positive balances there. And I'll just highlight the total amount across all 3 months totaled approximately $91 million. So that reflects our revenues coming in from PG&E, and you can see the splits between each of those months. And then the last item I'll highlight here is the outstanding loan balances for Alameda County. The preliminary estimate, which is preliminary just because we haven't repaid it yet, so there continues to be small increases for additional interest. That amount is $4,513,670.39. And for our Barclays credit facility, it's $14,300,000. In terms of collateral and customer prepayments, there's nothing to report there. $0 are currently held. And a few additional highlights. One is that we opened our interest-bearing accounts, which are an insured cash sweep account and a money market account. You'll see those were noted in the prior page under open and active accounts. We have, in the month of January, started to transfer funds into the interest-bearing account, which are unrestricted, but obviously are bearing an interest. The other couple items I'll highlight, one is we are continuing to dialogue with the Alameda County Auditor's Office regarding repayment of the county loan. That is still anticipated in the month of February. And given everything we'll talk about in the budget and such today, I think that plan is on track. And then the last item, which of course we just heard about, is we did complete the financial audit for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2017 and June 30th, 2018. Typically we might have a few additional highlights, but given the few different financial items we have at this board meeting, which include the follow-on budget item here, kept it relatively brief. Any questions?
Do we have any questions? All right. Well, this is an informational item. and we'll accept that. So we'll move to item 18, mid-year budget review.
So when we approved our 2018-2019 budget in June of 2018, the request was made to come back in January with a mid-year update, recognizing that the budget we put forward was fundamentally based on a whole set of projections. We had no operating history, no to base it off of. So we're now back to present our performance for the first half of the year, the actuals, to provide an updated forecast for the second half of the year. And so there, I will get into it. First slide. Oh, Stephanie?
Nope. Oh, it's Al.
Howard?
Do we have this up here,
It's Al looking at
Stephanie, do we have the slides?
You're
Nope.
the most, you stand out now.
Do folks have the...
We have a uniform on.
It's a little loud for the camera,
It's all right. We can see you.
Okay.
We're green next time.
Oh, there we go. Energy bill tour, public meeting. There we go.
You're on the clock, Nick.
Yeah. Howard has it. Howard has it. Okay.
Pull that up from the. Yeah,
There we go. Okay. So can we just go to? Oh, there we go. Budget summary, FY 2019. So this is the consolidated statement of revenues and expenditures. So we have the approved budget totals. They're the actual operating totals, which consist of half the year of actuals, and then half is the forecast, and then the difference. So you'll see that there's a considerable difference in the approved versus actual electricity sales, and similarly a considerable difference, almost a matching difference in the approved versus actual energy costs. And this has to predominantly do with the fact that when we put the budget together in May and June, at the time, we did not do it on an accrual basis. So we did it on a cash basis. So as a result, we didn't actually, because we did not really start to see revenue coming in until August because of the 2-month delay from when you bill to when cash comes in. We built the budget off of a cash basis, but as we're updating it, really looking at this as this is our income statement. On an income statement, you want to put your income statement together on an accrual basis. So what this reflects is what we expect our accrued costs and our accrued income to be, and that is really the reason why we're seeing a pretty significant. One of the reasons why we're seeing a difference. The other reason is, we saw some deviation from our forecast. So when we put our budget together in June, we were assuming much higher opt-outs. If you remember, we were assuming a 10% opt-out because we wanted to take a very conservative approach to where our opt-outs would be. As you saw, we are observing actually 2% opt-out. So obviously that's going to be beneficial to us in increased revenue, but that means we're also buying more energy, so that's going to increase our costs. So those are two of the major reasons why we're seeing some deviation. I will also just note that when we think about budgeting for energy sales, so our revenues, and budgeting for energy costs, it's always going to be really an inexact science, because the major driver of a deviation of sales is going to be the weather. You have a hot year, you're going to sell more. You have a cool year, you're not going to sell as much. Hot year, you're going to buy, the power costs are going to be higher. Cool year, power costs are going to be lower. And that's just something you can't forecast. So when you're budgeting, you just have to put your best guess estimate out there, recognizing that there's going to be, some movement year to year there. That being said, I think the highlight we're seeing here is that, we're forecasting to end the year with a $58 million surplus, which is just about $2.7 million above what we had forecast as our surplus in our budget. So I will go to the next slide here where we break it down into the constituent categories. So on a revenue side, as I mentioned, these are largely representative of the actual revenues we have observed for our first 6 months of operations. And then we are forecasting revenues for the second half. One thing to note when we think about forecasting our revenues for the second half of the year is, the PCIA is coming into effect. There are changes to rates that are coming into effect. What we have used as our baseline here is we're assuming that the new PCIA will come into effect on March 1st, and the new PG&E rates will go into effect on March 1st. There's still considerable possibility for movement in where those PG&E rates land March 1st. They could also be pushed to April 1st. Depending on what happens there, that could have a material effect on what our energy revenues look like. But this is based on our best estimate of what PG&E rates are likely to be and what the PCIA is likely to be for March, April, May, and June. Next is energy operations. So this is really these are our energy expenses. Again, it's the same methodology that I described about actual energy costs versus forecast energy costs. Two things to note here is that we are seeing a roughly $82,000 increase in our expected data management and billing and customer service costs. This is largely due to some increases that we've seen related to the third product that we launched. So the Renewable 100, that was not in our initial budget for data management services, and that required considerable programming updates and as well to deal with certain communities proactively opting all of their customers up. The big line item here is $500,000 in higher PG&E service fees, and this is a result of an oversight in our budget setting where we used an old calculation for PG&E service fee. We set it at, I believe it was 21 cents per meter per month, and the actual rate is 35 cents per meter per month, and that's what explains the $500 deviation there. And then finally, overhead operations. This really is the category that I think has the most, we have the most control over, and what you'll see there is we are beating our approved budget by $3.4 million. Largely driving that is based on some concerns that we're seeing around the PCIA decision. We have made the proactive decision to defer and to slow and or defer some hiring. So in our approved budget, we had 30 positions. Currently, our forecast is to hire up to 24 positions in this fiscal year. We also assumed a very conservative assessment around the cost of our fringe benefits. So we assumed a 1.4 adder on salaries associated with insurance, retirement, payroll. In actuality, that number has been more like 1.25 to 1.3. So that's just, we were very conservative in our budgeting, and it's coming out lower. For our third-party services, consultants, marketing, professional services, what we're seeing is just we made fairly conservative estimates about what our requirements would be, and we aren't spending as much. And in some cases, I have asked my staff to come back with reductions in some of their proposed spend in certain areas where we're using consultants. So the reduction that you're seeing in other professional services of $1.1 million reflects both some things haven't cost as much, like some of our marketing activities, and we're just not spending as much. On On the local development front, so at our last meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion about our local development budget. I think at this point, given that we still don't have our 2019 rates and we don't have the final 2019 PCIA, I don't think that it is yet appropriate to come back with a recommendation one way or the other as to adjusting the local development business plan budget. I really want to have a better sense of not just what our performance is going to be this fiscal year, but what we likely are to see next budget year. And if the PCIA goes up higher than we expect and rates go down more than we expect, then we want to be prepared for that. And that's just going to be something we won't know until we see the final decision from the commission, which hopefully will come in the next weeks. Let's go to the next slide, EBC debt. From a debt standpoint, Howard touched on these points in his treasury report, but just to reiterate, our total outstanding debt is $19.8 million, with the plan that we expect to pay down our outstanding debt to the county and our outstanding debt to Barclays in February. One thing to note is when we think about paying down our debt to Barclays, this does not reduce our ability to access those funds. This is a revolving working capital facility. So if the funds are not outstanding, it just means we're not paying interest. We do have to pay a commitment fee on those funds, so we are paying something to be able to use them if we need them. And finally, on the last slide is our consolidated projected balance sheet. And what you're seeing here is our forecast of a net position as of the end of November of $53 million of net cash. Now that does not reflect some energy costs that we have not actually seen the invoices for. But I think what it reflects, though, is a very strong position going into 2019. So with that, this is an informational item. If there's an interest in coming back with a budget update, we can do so. But given that the energy expenses are sort of going to fluctuate one way or the other, it's really hard to sort of know where we'll land, and that we're not asking to increase our budget for overhead or for personnel. I think our interpretation is we are within our authority to continue to manage our budget as is. But I would seek guidance from the board as to whether or not you'd like us to come back next month for any sort of formal approval related to these updates.
I mean, these are mid-year updates. I don't think there needs to be any approval on this, but are there any questions? Actually, before I ask for questions, when you repay the county, can you do me a favor and not just mail it to them? Can you come down to the Board of Supervisors and can we at least make this? I mean, I think it's important for everybody to know that the loan's been paid back, and what I'm talking about is it's probably a good PR thing to let our customers even know. So just don't drop it in the mail and let the auditor get it and feel good for one day, okay?
You want one of those big checks, don't you?
I want a big check. I want a big one, and I want the board members down there. I want it to be a big deal.
One clarifying question. Would you like us to come back in February seeking a formal approval to repay?
I think we've been clear, but it's budgeted.
Yeah, it's budgeted. Yep.
So, okay. Okay. So, are there questions? No, let's not just do it. Let's do it big. Go big or go home. Director Elwood?
Thank you. In the budget update, it does say that the funds for the local development business plan and local development should be revisited once we have the PCIA and rate information. And that is actually why we're setting our community meeting before we get that, so people can just understand the programs, and then we will revisit it after we get the budget information. So I know at least we would like to see what the recommendation is as far as how much we can put into fulfilling the promise of EBCE to local development in each of our communities. So at least that part, as part of your recommendation, it says that part should be revisited, and we would for sure want that.
Director Cobb. Thank you. So when I can't remember if it was the last meeting, the meeting before, but you prepared some possible scenarios in terms of tightening our belts, given the PCIA decision, and so I don't recall what was the outcome. That was just like a heads up kind of thing. Here's some options, and here's some things we might have to do. Is there going to be a time where you're coming to us to get approval to choose certain things, or are you going to be just doing those on your own until the next budget comes?
So the three categories there were, one was related to managing our overhead expense, so salaries, professional services, other. One was related to interest expense, and one was related to local development. So what you're seeing here is we're actually observing, both naturally because we were conservative on our estimate and then because of proactive action, a 23% reduction in overhead relative to the budget. So that exceeds what we discussed at our last meeting of a 20% reduction. We are forecasting, given our position, to repay all of our outstanding debt to the county and Barclay, so that would reduce our interest expense. And then on the local development side, we're not recommending anything at this point. We want to wait and see where rates in the PCIA land, and then come back at our second meeting in February, once we have that clarity, to have a discussion about what, if any, adjustments should be made.
Okay, I thank you. I recall making a comment, I think it was last time when this all was presented, that at some point, when we have to make some decisions, some choices about options that you have in order to meet or to keep rates down, as we more or less promised, and there are choices to make, as opposed to, oh, you have to do this, there's no real choice. I think I suggested that it be presented to us so we can at least weigh in on those choices, whether we informally weigh in or we direct you to make a certain option. That's what I think I asked about that, and my sense was that when that time comes, that will happen.
Absolutely, and I think from our perspective, the two items related to interest, paying down our interest, and the overall sort of pace of hiring. I think those are prudent things to do, kind of irrespective of the PCIA situation. They also happen to reduce our costs. I think the proactive things to do are, whether it's adjustments to some of the local development business plan expenditures, it's considering our products, considering our value proposition. I think those are the fundamental questions that I took your comment at our last meeting is wanting to focus on. And at this point, we believe that we don't have to touch upon those issues, mostly because the question of the PG&E's rates and the PCIA has been pushed until March.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Go ahead, Al.
Okay, thank you. So two questions. One, I'm assuming, well, it says here that the cost for interest on the Barclays credit facility is based on repayment in June. And it says it'll save us, the next bullet is that it'll save $250,000 by repaying in February. So what is staff's plan? What month are you planning to repay it in?
So we are planning to repay in February, I believe.
Yeah, that is what we sort of budgeted, but I think we want to continue to evaluate that, especially in light of other events currently happening, just how much cash we have on hand. And so, this is an item we could take back to the board in February to get additional feedback if we want to indeed go ahead and do that for the Barclays credit facility, unless you have direction now. But I think in terms of budget, we had anticipated February payment.
And my initial feedback would be to repay it sooner rather than later. I mean, it is a line of credit. It doesn't go away. It's almost as good as cash on hand, right? Mm-hmm. Almost. So I'm comfortable with that. And then there was a second issue, which...
Senior moment, Al?
Apparently. Yeah.
Nice.
Let's start in your 40s?
I'm having it
We'll
go to
come back
somebody
to me
else.
if I remember.
I don't know. I don't think anybody else wants to speak. So it's fish or cut bait. All right. All right. Cut bait. All right. Anybody else on this item? Okay. If it comes back to you before, we'll give you the opportunity. So as I understand it, we'll move to item 19, but that's pulled. That's pulled on.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we're at board member and staff announcements. Any board member comments? You have one? Okay, go ahead.
I, along with the Red Cross, are sponsoring a MLK Day of Service blood drive on Monday, MLK service holiday. It's at the Red Cross Blood Center in Rockridge, North Oakland, between 2 and 6 p.m. If anybody's interested in donating blood, if you're eligible and interested in donating blood, contact me or call my office, and happy to fit you in. You will help save lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay, so I just have a couple things. First of all, I talked with our executive director, and I want to make sure that we get the committees established. We have the executive committee, the marketing programs, regulatory and legislative committee, and the finance, procurement, administration committee. If you would all send me an email, preferably by no later than Monday, of which committee you would like to sit on. I'll do the best I can to accommodate everybody's wishes. These committees are being established to hopefully run like some of the other regional bodies. That makes the meeting a little bit more efficient, and also make sure that we hear all the business that we need to hear. So please make sure you get to me on that. On the secondly, I'm asking the executive committee to Leia's review is up, so I'm asking that the executive committee at their next meeting take up Leia's review. I've asked that the chair of that committee kind of take the lead on working with Leia in the next couple days to talk about wants and desires, and then I would ask that if any board member wants to submit any comments or any thoughts on the performance of our council, to just go ahead and forward that to the director of, the chair of the executive committee. And if you would do me a favor and CC me, I would appreciate it. What are you guys snickering about? I'm just dumping a lot on you right now, aren't I? So I think that will cover it. Is there anybody else that has anything?
Chair, could you name the committees again?
Oh, the committee. Great. The committee is, we already have, as you know, the executive committee up and running. Then we have marketing programs, regulatory and legislative, and then finance, procurement, and administration. So, and the other thing that I want to say is, one of the reasons I wanted to get these committees established is not only does it make it easier to run the board meetings, because we will still have the chairs of those committees report out on their meetings, and we will still adopt what they're bringing forward. But really what I'm also trying to do is get more external involvement from the board, not just have this executive committee. I want everybody to be a part of something. And so that's why I'm asking that you submit to me what it is you would be interested in serving on. And I'll do the best I can to accommodate everybody. Director Rigg.
Has any meeting schedule been established for these committees?
I think staff has their thoughts on how they want to do the meetings. Look, we're the board. I personally want to leave it up to the committees to establish when they meet. But I would say that, we should listen to the input of the staff. We probably want to have the committee meetings as the executive committee during the day. That way, it's least disruption to staff, because we can't now have them start chasing committee meetings, every night. So it'll probably be during the day. But again, I would like the committee to kind of establish their schedule. Or do we want to, executive committee now meets on a Friday, do we want to just stack them? Staff spends all day in committee meetings? Or, do we want to do them on different days of different weeks so it's less disruptive to them? But again, I kind of want to leave it up to the members of that committee. Does that make sense? Okay. Did that make sense to you, Nick? All right. Anybody else? Director May.
I was just going to say that if the committees are related or the staff members are related on the different committees, it might make sense to stack those together to make it more efficient for staff. And then also in case the people that are serving on those committees might be able to cover both at the same time.
Okay. All right. With that, if there's no other announcements, good night.